Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
Bob Anthony.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm their guest and friend, Alan Singer.
And happy to have full complement, including Dr. Singer, educator-historian, and Raymond's back with us after a brief hiatus. And being brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Zoom, and hopefully it will air on Manhattan Neighborhood Network next Monday. We're taping it the Wednesday before, and today is actually February 1st that we're taping. So anyway, we're still in the aftermath of mass shootings in California. I don't even want to go check my feed because in this country, every other day there's a mass shooting, so there may have been one or two since the last two in California by the time you see this show that we're taping, folks. But those recent California horrendous shootings brings that issue to the forefront. And the only thing that eclipsed that was the arrest and the release of the tape of Tyre Nichols and that horrendous beating that he took. And we're still suffering through the trauma of seeing that video, and the country still hasn't fully recovered from that. So let's put that in perspective, guys. There's been a lot of comparison to the beating of Rodney King. But Bob, what was your takeaway from Ben Crump's first press conference? Because there was swift movement on bringing the folks who perpetrated that beating to accountability.
I mean, actually, while we're taping February 1st, we're actually in the middle of the funeral for Tyre Nichols. I think Al Sharpton just spoke, and some other notable speakers, I guess, are on the agenda. But yes, and including Ben Crump, the attorney representing the family, and many others in civil rights cases. But he mentioned at his press conference that he was basically impressed by the swift justice meted out here to the 5 Black police officers who beat Tyre Nichols. And he said that this should serve as within days they were fired and charged, not a year for the video to get released, as was the case with the Chicago police years ago, and many other cases where there's 6 or 1 year delay. So he was impressed by that, but he said this should serve as a blueprint on how swift justice can be meted out, no matter what color the police officers are. And he did make the comment that this shows this should be done even in cases where the officers are white, which was, he made a point to say that, because we've seen so many cases where delay, and then no justice. And it's in the George Floyd case, in which case there would have been no justice had it not been for a video from a teenager. So yeah, Ben Crump had a lot to say about how this could be used in future dealings with police killings.
So, and Alan, there was another part to that caveat about swift justice, because it turned out there were other individuals. The DA was saying, well, this is still being investigated. There may be more charges, etc. But there was an egregious, to my way of thinking, oversight in 5 Black officers immediately being fired and arrested, and then 1 white police officer. What was the report, Alan, do you recall, on what his role had been and why he was not fired?
Well, apparently there was a 6th officer who was white, who was involved in the stop and may have tasered Tyre Nichols, but he was not involved in the beating, at least that was on tape. So there, for him, he was suspended. He's being investigated. There are other people suspended, investigated, are the EMTs, because the EMTs were standing there looking and did not act while a person was dying in the street. So there was a lot of people who either actively participated, passively participated, or just grossly irresponsible. And I guess some of that's got to be sorted out.
Yeah, the deputy, go ahead, Ray.
No, I'm just going to ask, has there been any statement by the EMTs that were on the scene? Because it's my belief, I know a lot of people in the medical profession. I know a couple of EMTs. Their minds are set to help someone in need. It's not a conscious decision on their part. That's what they do. Hello?
You're here,
we
Ray.
still,
Go
we still
ahead.
hear you.
No, okay, there. I lost the screen for a minute. I'm sorry. And they automatically respond. I'm thinking, now, of course, I don't know the truth here, but I'm thinking that the police refused to let them aid him.
I don't think there's any video to indicate that, Ray.
I don't either. And, you know,
the cameras show them standing around.
Yeah.
So my question, I do believe the supervisor in the fire department terminated them immediately because they looked at the video and say, why were you not doing what you were supposed to be doing? So they just flat, okay, that's enough investigation for our purposes. You're terminated. My question is, where is the other accountability for the local, is it Shelby County deputies that were also on the scene, who stood by and did nothing while all this was going on? And my question is, are those Shelby County deputies, I shouldn't say Shelby because I didn't double check, but I believe it was Shelby County. Were those primarily white Shelby County deputies? Is that why we're having a lengthier investigation as to their culpability in just standing around? I haven't seen anything about them being suspended or fired, just the investigation is still ongoing. And so I'm harking back to Ben Crump's press conference about, let me see what you're going to do when white people are involved in these kinds of situations. And it looks like we're seeing a two-tiered investigation going on in this one instance. Black folks are fired immediately and white folks are being investigated while they're still on the payroll. But anyway, that's
Eric, I think the broader issue, one of the broader issues at least, is the functioning of these anti-crime forces. They called them the Scorpion Team.
Yeah.
Even that name suggests this kind of aggressive police. It is not about protecting people. It's about stereotyping people and saying, well, they could potentially be criminals. And we have that in New York. There was they suspended the anti-crime unit because it was making those kinds of stop and frisk and car stops that were heavily racially motivated.
Yes.
And we've had those teams commit violence. We had the Abner Louima case in 1997. So the broader issue is policing that essentially an occupied army in communities. It's just another gang.
Bingo. And that gets us back to, we've been down this road before, me, but let's just go back down again. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about policing in this country, not just New York, not just Memphis, LA is notorious, across the country. There is a mindset to policing even before the latest militarization and turning them into armed camps, where from the inception of how police forces came into being in North America, in these United States, talk to us about that history.
Well, their function in many cases was to terrorize people. I mean, in the past, we've looked at the slave patrols in the South, and if anybody saw the movie Emancipation, the people who are escaped, they're not trying to catch them to bring them back. They want to tear up their bodies and put them on spikes to terrify the rest of the population. That was the function of the police during Mississippi Summer, where they killed civil rights workers. So there is this long history of police terror against communities.
So there was slavery in all 13 colonies. So eventually all 13 colonies had these slave patrols. And these slave catchers, and their function was basically to come and snatch runaway Africans or natives, whoever decided they wanted to escape slavery, and bring them back. And it didn't matter what force they used. The only caveat they had was you can't kill them because they're our property and they're valuable. And so the nature of the beast was Sometimes they would chop off a foot to stop them from running away, and also give a lesson to anybody else that might think they're going to run away to escape. Sometimes they would chop off some other part of the body. But these are historically documented treatments of enslaved people, Black, brown, Native, whomever, when they were trying to send a message. And that permeated the entire cast of slave patrolling. And those are what evolved into police departments across the 13 colonies and then across the 48 continental United States, correct?
Very much so. There was no standard police really until the 20th century. But what you've always had, I think, in the police departments was the sense that Blacks by nature were criminal. They had to be controlled. That if you stopped someone, they had to prove they were legitimate. They had to prove they were innocent. And it goes completely counter to what the American legal system is supposed to be.
Okay, all right. So that gets us speaking in terms of historical interpretation. I want to revisit historical interpretation on those mass shootings and the proliferation of these weapons of mass destruction, I call them, because these assault weapons are weapons designed to kill as many people as possible. That's what they were designed for. They were military weapons to be used in times of war. And now we got people walking around using them. And we've got Supreme Court ruling saying you can't ban them, or not that you can't ban them, but depending on how you ban them, you might be in violation of the United States Constitution. Alan, I keep harking back to your expertise on the Constitution and history and the Second Amendment and what it actually said, what it was originally designed for. Sorry, I didn't call up the exact quote. I should have pulled up the Second Amendment. And then we could have said, yes, well-regulated militia, et cetera, we have the right to keep and bear arms. And I believe the subclause is in a well-regulated militia, et cetera, et cetera. The interpretation that originally kept that pretty much in check for centuries till what, 1940 something or 1960 something, was that, yeah, you can't just go buy a weapon and walk around and claim you're using the Second Amendment. But that changed. And now, yeah, you can go buy a weapon and states can't pass laws to curtail your right to take that weapon anywhere. No sensitive areas or anything.
Well, again, it starts basically in the 1980s. In some ways, it's a response to racial unrest in urban areas. And what they're saying is, just like policing was often to control Black communities, they're saying white people need guns. And so what we have are the reinterpretation of the Second Amendment over the course of about 20 years by the Supreme Court, to the point where it's virtually impossible to regulate weapons. I mean, one of the things that I can't understand is the police always argue that their aggressive policing techniques are justified because there are so many guns out there in the street. Well, if the problem is there are so many guns out there in the street, why aren't we getting those guns off the street? What kind of country is it which gives everybody can have a gun and then worries that they've got guns?
Unfortunately, we're at a point where local federal judges are swift to, I don't want to say agree with, but take action that helps people trying to maintain possession of guns. We just saw this in New Jersey, where a federal judge blocked a ban on carrying guns at beaches or casinos, and had previously blocked or at least paused a ban on guns in places like libraries. Please, you mean we really need your gun in a library? And other
sensitive places. Yeah.
A problem keeping guns out of it seemed like a common sense plan, trying to keep guns out of Times Square. I mean, so even the simplest attempts at
You're freezing, Bob.
Involved, yeah.
What? Yeah, your software is going into freeze mode. But yeah, common sense attempt to keep guns out of sensitive places seem to be struck down by the Supreme Court, I think is what you were saying.
Okay, is my video okay now? It seems to
Yeah.
have snapped back.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
But even if they were to ban guns, there are so many guns out there now, and there's no way you'd be able to collect those or confiscate them. Anybody, I mean, come on, look, realistically, any criminal or anybody else for that matter that wants a gun can get one way or another, no matter what laws you pass. I mean, of course, the laws would help, but there's so many guns in this. I forget the statistics. I don't know, Bob, if you might have that in your head somewhere, but there are like 4 or 5 handguns for every citizen in the United States, something like that. It's an astronomical number. I don't know what it is, but you're not going to get rid of handguns that easily, no matter what laws are passed. So what else can we do?
I don't know if you can, because is it Australia or New Zealand? I forget which country.
But they never had that many handguns there in the first place because
Doesn't matter how many. They just said, you got to turn those in. And guess what?
they did.
They mandated they turned them in.
That's
My
New
point
Zealand.
is,
Yeah.
if you want to do something as a government, you can use your laws and your enforcement policies to do that. You have to want to do that, though. And so I agree with you that there are too many guns. That's our problem, because California has some of the most stringent laws on the books. Quote, stringent. They're stringent only relatively speaking. They're barely, I mean, compared to laws in other countries about gun ownership, they're like a Band-Aid. But because this country is so far out of whack when it comes to guns, they call California laws stringent. Across the planet, that's like, huh? That's stringent? But anyway.
Ray, you have a car, don't you? Do you have a car?
Mm-hmm.
Now, well, on your car, you registered your car, you
Yes.
pay taxes on your car, you
Mhm.
carry insurance on your car, and
Mhm.
you were trained before you were allowed to drive the car.
Bingo. Why can't you do that with guns? In order to buy a gun, you need to be trained to use the gun. You need to be, I'm just repeating what Alan just said.
Yeah.
It can be done. I'm just saying there's not the will politically to do this, because we've been sent down this rabbit hole by Supreme Court rulings and a Republican, I'm just going to go off the deep end and say, a Republican establishment that caters to these gun owning wackos who don't want to give up these guns, who think that, quote, I am not an American if I don't own an assault weapon. And so you're not going to infringe on my right to own an assault weapon. It's totally crazy. But anyway, I don't know.
I don't have a problem with like communities, I'm a city kid. I don't need a gun for anything. But people live in communities where they hunt for their food. And I get that. You need
Yep.
your rifle for that.
Yep.
And I nope, but you don't need a big assault weapon, for that type of thing. That's what we're trying to go after. We're not trying to go after the hunting rifles, the deer hunts in Wisconsin, the bear hunts in New Jersey. I mean, that's not what this is after.
Common sense use of weapons was what actually took place before the crazy misinterpretation of the Second Amendment.
Right.
People use their guns and they use them legally. They were entitled, they got licensed to use them. States that didn't require license, especially in communities like you're talking about, where people actually need to have a weapon out in the woods and the wilds and whatever. It's not until the back end of the 20th century that this thing got out of hand. And that's why you got all these mass shootings at the back end of the 20th century. I don't believe was Columbine the actual first major mass shooting?
I think so.
And that's the back end of the 20th century. So I know this is a subject that's the gun nuts, and there are responsible gun owners who actually would like common sense gun laws. And they have come out and said that. But you had the NRA and those other crazy nuts who decide, no, we're going to push this to the extreme. Just like you have the crazies in education, or not in education, who are trying to, hijack education and the teaching of history in this country, with this issue of, quote, critical race theory. And actually, that might be as good a way to segue to that topic, because you got the crazy nuts on the gun issue and the Second Amendment, and the inability to pass national gun laws because you hung up on qualified immunity for police officers so they can get away with killing people left and right. And so the Republicans won't let you pass a law that's going to actually get rid of qualified immunity. And then you got on the flip side, on the educational side, you got a Ron DeSantis who says, oh no, I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, so we're not going to teach American history, and anything that deals with teaching American history properly, we will not dig into, which is a good way to segue, Alan, to this brouhaha about the AP course that the College Board just caved and explained it to our viewers.
The College Board is a private nonprofit agency that develops courses and tests that allow high school students to get college credit during their junior and senior year in high school. Now, they developed a new course, African American Studies, along with conjunction with a number of very prominent scholars, including Henry Louis Gates. They piloted the test, and then all of a sudden, Governor Ron DeSantis announced that that course would not be offered in Florida because it violated their Stop Woke Act, which made it illegal to discuss critical race theory in classrooms. Well, there are about 40 states that either passed laws or debating laws challenging critical race theory and making it illegal. College Board, under the pressure of this political right-wing pressure, caved, and they said, well, we're going to take that last unit, which talks about Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, contemporary literature. We're going to make that optional, and it's not going to be on the test. So effectively, by making it optional, not on the test, what they're saying is, you want to teach it, you can, but no one's going to teach it because you got to prep the kids for the test. They caved to Ron DeSantis, who did this because of his political ambition to be president of the United States. Now, DeSantis majored in history at Yale. Now, either he's a total ignoramus, or this is a political ploy to build up right-wing, white support. Our kids should not have to learn about racism in American society.
Now, my degree is in history from Columbia, and my history degree from Columbia tells me that I keep my ears open to other theories, not just the ones I grew up with, or not just the ones that my political background says are right. It tells me that I got to do, if something sounds wrong to me, do the research, find out what other people think, read the other, read everybody's writings, and then come up with an opinion as to how you should teach that or how you should make that available to students. You don't say, you know what, I don't think this is good. This isn't American. That's what DeSantis is doing. So his history degree is not being used. I have an Ivy League history degree, and he's blowing his with this political BS.
Maybe Yale could take it back. I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, Columbia beats Yale every year in basketball, but that's another story.
Well, there are two things about this discussion. One is personal. You named, quote, eminent historians, and one you named would not have been one of my eminent historians, Alan. So, but I'm sure there were other eminent historians that weighed in on this AP course that the College Board wanted to put out there.
Some
of them have spoken up. Some of them have spoken up about the fact that no, this should not have been made optional, and that they see political influence and caving to political influence on the part of the College Board, and that's basically crucial, because this harks back to the discussion we had on the last show on academic freedom and how to teach critical and difficult subjects in school without getting interference from outside politicians and non-educators who are really just trying to make political points. So I don't know how much time we have left,
We have about just 2.5 minutes.
but I think we should at least put in perspective how DeSantis is trying to shut down the teaching of real American history and the value of the contributions of African Americans and other people, non-white people, to the development of this country, ties into the historical and current disregard for non-white lives that's evidenced by these various police departments across the country. When, Ray, you've got the statistics about how many more people might be inclined to be arrested, Black people and brown people, 3 times more likely to be stopped and on whatever the grounds, what's it?
Suspicion. You fit the description is often what they say when they stop a Black man on the street. Well, you fit the description of a crime that we're investigating. Any ploy. I mean, you can, if I'm a Black man and I'm driving a car and I've got a broken windshield, I might get stopped and get a ticket for that. You know, the statistics are high, and I think it's more like 4 to 1 statistically of a Black man being stopped as opposed to a white man.
Okay, well,
I don't have that right in front of me. That's
between 2.5 and 3.5 or something like that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's around there somewhere. Yeah, most definitely.
Now, DeSantis also wants a mandate that Western civilization be taught as a mandatory course in all college programs. Now, I actually think that's a good idea, though I think DeSantis and I may disagree about what should be the focus of Western civilization.
Mhm.
For example, are they going to look at human trafficking and the transatlantic slave trade? Are they going to look at the Columbian Exchange and the genocide of Native Americans? Are they going to look at, fascism and communism and the ideology going wild? Are they going to look at Holocaust and the extermination of
Europe? I mean, DeSantis definitely wants to put his own finish on it, but we're about out of time.
This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm Raymond Peterson, and glad to be back.
Alan Singer, their guest and friend. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us, folks, and we will catch you the next time.